overcome. We shall overcome.
We
We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand, walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we will overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we will overcome someday. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for everyone who joined in. Lauren, if you could go ahead and mute everybody again, then we're going to turn it over to Ray Wirt. Ray Wirt is the husband of our state senator, Mallory McMorrow. He's on the front lines volunteering. He's going to let us know what he's doing and how you can help if you're interested in volunteering. Ray, please take it.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Can you hear me? Great. Okay, so I'm over at the City of Detroit's first drive-through coronavirus testing site, which is at the State Fairgrounds, just a few miles away from our home of Royal Oak. I've been out here for the past few days running a shift in the morning, and what we've found is that, you know, there's still a really massive bottleneck, but the bottleneck in terms of testing is not on the ground. What I'm seeing here in the city of Detroit, which has been really well put together, and it's really a testament to Mayor Duggan and his healthcare connections that we've even been able to get the number of tests that we're able to provide right now. So we're doing somewhere between 500 to 750 a day, and that is entirely limited by the ability to be able to process those tests at a lab. Right now, we're having to send all of our tests to New Jersey, where we're getting anywhere between a 2 and 6 day turnaround. Now, we have a couple of test kits on the ground that are going to allow us to be able to test anywhere between 250 to 300 people in a day. But those are going to be mainly focused on being used by frontline healthcare workers as well as first responders. But until we're able to fully ramp up testing, we've got limitations. But we're getting more and more tests every single day, and consequently, we're going to need more volunteers. And it's not just volunteers at places like this testing location. It's also volunteers at food banks. It's volunteers at shelters. It's volunteers where some of the people who have the least among us are going to need help. And the great news is that there's a way that many of you can help. So if you are a person who is not immunocompromised, a person who is relatively younger, there are great volunteer opportunities. If you go to the United Way Southeast Michigan's website, and Tom, I'll send you the exact link for it. But we have a bunch of different options for people to come in and volunteer. You're going to get protective clothing like these PPE that I'm wearing today. so you don't have to worry that you're going to be exposed to anything. And in many of these cases, we don't actually interact with patients. We're interacting with their vehicles. So at a place like a testing site, there's a really, really low risk, and we need all the help that we can get. So if you find yourself with 6 hours to spare, as I'm sure many people have, and you want to be able to do something, we'd love to have your help.
Thanks, Ray. Immediately after the meeting, I'll send out the link to that volunteer site, and I'll also send it out an email to everybody on our list. Does anybody
Great.
have any questions for Ray? And if you do have a question, on the bottom of your screen, click the participants icon, and then that'll open a window over on the right side of your screen, and then you can click the blue raise hand icon. So does anybody have any questions for Ray before he goes?
Yeah, we actually do. Nomi?
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Ray, I have a question. Do you know what the criteria are for getting tested? Because I've heard some people who said they're sure they have it, but they can't get a test.
So the criteria right now is that you have to get a prescription from your doctor. So if you have a doctor who's willing to write you a prescription, then the next step is that you have to get an appointment set up. So there's a 313 number for you to call, and I'll provide that to Tom as well, so that you have the, you know where, you know who to call, but you have to start with a doctor providing a prescription. And really, as I said before, we're not at a place where we're doing general testing yet. So everything has to be done with a prescription and an appointment.
So that means you're going to have to go to get an appointment with your doctor to get a prescription.
Well, yes and no, meaning that thanks to the governor expanding telehealth opportunities, you should be able to call your doctor, tell them you're having the symptoms that you're having, and your doctor should be able to email you a prescription, which you could just have on your phone and bring with you. So it's not anything in fact, we don't take a piece of paper. So what we're actually doing is taking a photo of the prescription and a person's driver's license. So there are ways to be able to do this that minimize risk for you and for healthcare workers.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Full disclosure, my daughter's really sick.
Got it. Well, call your doctor. And if your doctor is telling you no, call another doctor. And in fact, what I'll also do is I'll give you a list I'll send through a list of doctors that are a little bit more trained and have more experience with this, who can actually help you to understand what your risk level is.
Oh, Ray, if you could send me that list, I will be extremely
I'll send them through to Tom.
Thank you.
And as soon as I get that from Ray, I will pass it on. Does anybody else have a question for Ray Wirt?
Doesn't look like it, no.
Ray, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it very much, and thank you for your service out there.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray.
Okay, we're going to do our welcome and introduction section. My name's Tom Regan. I'm the chair of the Greater Royal Oak Democratic Club. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Lauren, could you do the rounds?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Jasinski. I'm the vice chair of the club and also hosting the meeting. So like Tom keeps mentioning, if you need anything or having problems with stuff, you can send me a chat and that will come to me directly, and I can try and help you while Tom runs the meeting. Ian, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian. I am the treasurer for the club.
And Tim, I'm trying to find you. There you are.
Like, here I am. I'm Tim. I'm the secretary who's very derelict in my duties. I didn't do the minutes last month. I'll get those done maybe during the meeting, and we can send those out with the email that Tom sends out.
I was just going to mention that Tim Chikorsky has scandalously failed to provide us minutes from last month's meeting, but he took care of that for me. And then this is the time of the meeting where we invite, if this is your first time at a meeting, or if this is your first time here in a long time, we invite you to introduce yourself and tell us why you joined us. Now, if you'd like to do that now, you'd need to raise your hand virtually. And at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a participants icon. Click that, and that'll open up a window on the right side of your screen. And then there's a little blue raise hand. So if there's anybody who would like to introduce yourself and tell us why you joined us, click the blue raise hand icon.
Nomi. Oh, hang on 1 second, okay? You're still muted.
Hi.
Okay, now we
I'm
can hear you.
Nicole Rich. I'm a campaign coordinator for Andy Meisner, and I'm here on his behalf. And I want to thank all of you. I'm looking forward to the presentation, and I want to thank Ray for your update. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to introduce yourself and tell us why you came? Not required, but you're welcome to right now. Just click that blue raise hand icon. Going once, going twice. Okay, treasurer's report in. Oh, excuse me, Nina Abrams. Nina Abrams just raised her hand.
Hi, I'm here, one, because you guys do a good job, and two, I'm haunting people, precinct delegates, precinct delegates, precinct delegates. We've got about 40% more precinct delegates in Oakland County this year than we had. We had 500 slots to fill, most of them north, not all down here, but we got a new 400 slots for the county, and so we're recruiting, we're urging people to get there. Anybody wants to contact me, contact Chuck Altman, contact Marianne Fontana, go on the precinct delegate Facebook page. May 5th is the date they're supposed to be in. That's giving us 30 days to get this done and to make sure we have enough precinct delegates in every area. So if you want more information, you can get it from any of us or from the precinct delegate site on Facebook, or you can just check the county clerk and see who signed up for your precincts, because there's a lot of work to be done, and we're not going to be able to knock doors as we had, so we've got to get out as many absentee ballot voters as we can.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Does anybody else want to introduce yourself? Going once, going twice? Alrighty, Ian, go ahead and do our treasurer's report, please.
All right, so during the month of March, we had some reimbursements to Tom for Facebook ads, etc., for about $350. We had rent for the month of March, which is the last month that we paid rent. We're not paying rent for this month since we're not using the space. And then Arv was paid for the banner that he purchased for the club. We had $266 of income last month as dues and 50/50. So our current balance is $3,780.75. And that number will matter later for a donation request we have.
Let's talk about that right now. Does anybody have any motions they want to raise and after hearing that treasurer's report?
I'd like to suggest that the club make a donation to the Gleaners Food Bank on our behalf. The suggested amount was $1,000. We do have money to work with, and I think that it's a generous offer at this time. Because we're not in person, we put together a poll to see if this is, oh, do I need a second, Tom? Sorry.
You need this. Would anybody like to second that motion? You can just second it by raising your hand. We have a second. We have a bunch of seconds. Alrighty. Is there any, so first everybody unraise your hand, and then we'll ask if there's any discussion for, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, is there any discussion for the motion of donating $1,000 to Gleaners? If you have a comment on that, go ahead and raise your hand right now. Ian.
So the only thing I wanted to add to that is we also have not done the $250 donation that was going to be for the Nature Center soiree, since that event didn't happen. So that money is still in our accounts, which I feel comfortable redirecting as the current situation demands, giving this to Gleaners, which we know is going to help the community in the current time.
Is there any other discussion?
I think since we made that motion and we did dedicate that money to the Nature Society, we should still give that to them, whether it's for that event or not. It essentially was just a donation to the organization. It wasn't necessarily allowing somebody to go to that dinner. And I think we have enough money to do both.
Yeah, we certainly don't require a vote. We voted on that last month, so we can still go ahead and send them the check. Yeah. Is there any other discussion on the motion to donate $1,000 to Gleaners? Well, Lauren, why don't you tell us how we vote?
All right, so in just a second, I'm going to launch a poll that's going to pop up on the screen in front of you. The question is, do you approve of a $1,000 donation to Gleaners Community Food Bank by our club? Yes, no, or I have a question, an additional question or comment before voting. If there was something that you wanted to ask or say that you weren't comfortable asking in front of everybody, you can just send me a message and we can clear up any questions about that, okay? So that should pop up in front of you. Go ahead and click your option, and when everyone's voted, or most people have voted, I'll turn it off.
You're muted, Lauren. I don't know if you're trying to say something.
I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Did everybody vote? Are we okay to go?
We've got about 50% of the votes in. Do we want to give everybody a couple more seconds, or?
I think we're good. If a person hasn't voted by now, I don't think they're going to vote. So go ahead and give us the totals.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Megan. With a vote of 96% of the people that cast a vote approving of this will then forward on a donation of $1,000 to Gleaners. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, Ian, so go ahead and write him a check and mail it off to him, please.
All right, I'm gonna probably try and see what I can do electronically just because I don't have stamps and going to the post office is not really on my wheelhouse right now.
That makes sense. Okay, let's go ahead and give it to our guest speaker, Megan Owens. Megan Owens is Executive Director of Transportation Riders United. That's the group that has lobbied relentlessly to get Detroit a public transit system. And they've been working on this for decades. And Megan, give us an idea what you're working on in transit in this age of the pandemic.
All right, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Now? Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity. I will say that the presentation that I had originally planned to give when Tom and I spoke 2 months ago is largely out the window because like so many other things in our lives, transit is really on its head these days, but it still remains incredibly essential for an essential lifeline for a lot of people. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to give you an update on what is happening on transit these days and what we hope to see happen in the not too distant future. I will say, as I said, the world is a bit flipped on its head. In my role of running a group that's been advocating for transit for 20 years, I urge you to not ride transit right now, unless you really, really need to. Like many of you, I've been sheltering in place for more than 3 weeks now, only ventured out a couple of times. But a lot of people don't have that choice. There are nurses, janitors, pharmacy techs, grocery workers, firefighters, just to name a few. People that we all depend on, who depend on public transit. So transit does remain extremely essential. Let me see if I can get my, we tested this earlier, and well, I should be able to show my screen if this wants to, if this thing will listen. Does that seem to be?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. Briefly, transit during the age of coronavirus and what we hope to see afterwards. In case anyone's not familiar, Transportation Riders United is a group that believes everyone should be able to get where they need to go, regardless of whether they can drive. We've been working for nearly 20 years to educate, mobilize, and advocate for more and better public transit options and other affordable, sustainable mobility choices. Because sadly, a lot of people don't have that choice, don't have that freedom. Now, in this day and age, during this coronavirus crisis, we do want to remind everyone, if you're sick, stay home. If you don't have essential needs to get out, it's important to stay home. But there are absolutely people who need to get to the hospital, to get to a grocery store, to care for a loved one, people who are in essential jobs, for whom transit remains a critical option, which is why transit services do remain open today. Both DDOT and smart bus services, both in the city and in the suburban communities, do continue to operate for those essential services, for the people who don't have other options and still need to get where they need to go. They're running largely on a Saturday schedule, but there are a lot of things changing. So we've set up a page on our site, detroittransit.org/COVID-19 service, to keep up to date with what services are available, where to get more information, and what's not available. Because for the first week or two, the queue line, or most services stayed open. Within the last week, the Q Line, People Mover, Transit Windsor, and even the new Detroit to Ann Arbor express bus have paused their services in the interim. But we do want to make sure that people can have accurate information. For those who do need to ride, the risks have been minimized as much as possible. There's a lot of extra cleaning and sanitizing going on, both at night. They do a deep clean, and even at the end of each run, they hired extra workers to get out there and clean those buses. They've also switched to, on both SMART and DDOT, directing everyone to come in and out of the rear doors so as to minimize interaction with the drivers. It's hard to stay 6 foot away from somebody who, when you got to walk right by the driver. And with that, they've also made transit free. So for those people who do need to ride, there is no charge for it. And of course, people who have physical needs can certainly still use the front, but by everyone else using the rear, that really minimizes the risk. And there is a important effort to try to spread out. Now, as I said, I'm not personally able to get out and ride. So if you are either still riding transit, if you have friends or family who either ride or drive those transit buses, we definitely want to hear about that experience. We've heard mostly that it's going very well, that people are spreading out, that the risk is minimal. But as you may have also heard, devastatingly, one of the DDOT drivers did pass away just a few days ago, and several others have tested positive. So we are trying to get a good sense of what's happening. And again, if you have the choice, stay home. But if you need to ride, we want to make that available. And we really want to show our appreciation for those drivers, for those workers. So we've put together a thank you. We're going to put together a big group thank you card for Detroit area transit workers who bring the nurses to the hospitals, the clerks to the grocery stores, the techs to pharmacies, the janitors everywhere we need them. They are, in fact, essential workers. They are putting their life at some risk, and so we need to show them appreciation. And again, only use it for those essential needs. And it is important to remember that while many of us don't need to use transit now, or even it may be optional other times, not everybody drives. There is a myth, a misperception that everyone in this region does drive, but a third of our society approximately can't. Certainly that includes people who are too young, and a lot of people who have aged out of driving. And in fact, many of us will have to retire from driving at some point in time and yet still want to be active and able to get around. There's also quite a few people who are physically unable to drive, or financially unable. And even after this crisis is over, a lot of people are going to be struggling even more financially than they have been. So the average cost of a car at $8,000 a year to own and operate and gas up and maintain and insure, that's way outside a lot of families' reach. As United Way has pointed out, 44% of people in this region are really on the edge and one crisis away, and this is a big crisis. So a lot more people are going to need to have affordable ways to get around once this is passed. And as a reminder for folks who aren't as aware, sometimes there's a perception that, well, there's plenty of transit for those who need it. That may be reasonably true in some sections of Detroit and along the Woodward corridor, areas of that sort, but there's still a lot of places in our region that if you don't drive, you can't get to. I spoke to someone who's pretty much, just a couple days ago, who's pretty much stranded in Rochester, in the Rochester area, because there is no transit service there. People in Plymouth, Novi, Livonia, Canton, Wixom, there's a lot of areas where there is no transit service at all, and so people can really be stranded. And it's because we have this patchwork system. If people aren't familiar, DDOT does run its own bus service. The city does for the People Mover and the DDOT bus, but each community decides here in Oakland County whether to be part of the Smart Bus service or not. And so we have this patchwork system that people have to vote on every few years. Now, I will say things are changing in Oakland County. We're certainly very lucky to finally have county leadership in both the executive office and in the commission who are deeply committed to improving public transit. In fact, the very last in-person meeting I was at before everything locked down was this Make Oakland Green campaign. Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, a number of other organizations have put together a climate plan and are working with the Oakland County leadership to make that happen. If you have not yet, it'd be great to sign on, to sign your name onto that, to show your support for Oakland County to become truly carbon neutral within its own county services by 2030 and push the entire county to be carbon neutral by 2050. And a centerpiece of that is public transit. Because transportation is the single largest source of climate pollution, improving transit is a critical way to do that. Now, there have been a number of different plans proposed in the last few years for ways to improve transit, and honestly, I feel like all of these region-wide service plans have been pretty darn good at addressing the needs that we have, to connect to more places, make sure that there aren't gaps in our system. There aren't places that if you can't drive, you can't get. That's just absurd in today's modern society, driving shouldn't be the limiting factor to whether you have access to jobs and opportunities. We also want service to run more frequently. Right now, especially during this crisis, a lot of the buses aren't running more than every 30 minutes or so. And even before, a lot of the service was too infrequent. We want to make sure that once this crisis is over, we not only restore all of the service that we did have, but that we run more frequently, and that people can just walk out to a bus stop and not look at a schedule, but know that it's going to be there when you want it. You shouldn't have to set your life around a transit service. It should be there when you need it. And have express connections, airport routes, commuter express. Let's give people choices to get off of those highways if they really don't want to be stuck in that traffic. These are just a few of the points of things that would be possible with an investment in transit. But right now, we spend less than nearly any other major metropolitan region. These are the 40 different metropolitan regions in the US that have more than 1 million people. If you go way down to the right there, you can see that we're right in there with, we're spending less per capita than Milwaukee or Houston or St. Louis or Cleveland. We're not necessarily saying we need to compete with New York and Seattle, but can we keep up with Columbus or Cincinnati? We still have some work to do to help persuade a larger section of this region that transit is essential. These are the results of the 2016 millage. You can see Detroit, certainly a lot of Southeast Oakland, Ann Arbor were very strongly supportive, and we believe remain so. A lot of the very rural areas are probably not going to become hugely supportive, but the more we can help people in areas like Rochester or Waterford or Commerce or Novi or Livonia, areas like that, understand why, even if you don't personally ride it, you benefit from our region having transit. You benefit when nurses can get to hospitals, when workers can get to their jobs that we all depend on. So we will continue. We don't know exactly what the path to the ballot is going to be. The reality is that while there was a legislative effort to allow 2 or 3 counties in the region to move forward with the ballot measure, even if 1 or 2 didn't want to be a part of it, just last month, just before all of this COVID chaos, the legislative maneuverings, political shenanigans got in the way of passing that bill, despite having very strong support from not only leaders in our region and in the business community, but even the speaker and the majority leader. But they couldn't get a majority of the outstate Republicans to get on board with it. And so once again, our overly gerrymandered political system got in the way. So at this point, it does not look like there's a way to get transit funding on the ballot for this year. However, leadership in Oakland County, in Wayne County, in Washtenaw remain very, very committed to figuring out what it's going to take for us to get a measure on a multi-county ballot. If Macomb wants out, fine. We should be able to. Right now, the RTA law doesn't allow that. But if 2 or 3 counties want to be able to move forward, which many of us do, to invest in more and better transit to ensure, in crisis or not, everyone has access to the places they need to go, we need to be able to do that. We don't know the exact timeline to get there, but I would, just in closing, remind you, transit is essential. It is staying open even through this crisis because people have to be able to get to jobs, get to doctors, get to grocery stores, etc. We are trying to thank those transit workers. Please join us in thanking those transit workers. I'll actually put up the link to that in the chat in just a minute. And we are very hopeful that as soon as this crisis is passed, we will be able to get back to working on increasing investment in transit and ensuring everyone has the options to get where they need to go. So those were the overall remarks that I wanted to share. So we can open it up to questions or comments. I'd love to hear what you all are hearing or thinking on this topic.
Okay, Megan, if you could stop sharing your screen, and then anybody who has a question for Megan, you want to click the participants icon on the bottom and then click the blue raise hand button, and then Lauren will unmute you and let you ask your question. So if you have any questions for Megan Owens of Transportation Riders United, well, first you click the participants icon on the bottom of your screen, then that'll open up a screen on the right, and then click that little blue raise hand icon. Well, I've got one question for you, Megan.
Sure.
How come we have these different overlapping transit agencies around here? That seems unique in the country. You know, we've got DDOT and SMART, and now this new RTA laid on top of it. Is there any way to get one transit agency for the region?
Well, actually, it's not that unique. Many regions have multiple providers, but what they have is a strong overarching system that can ensure that it feels like one system. If you're in Chicago, you might be on the PACE suburban bus or the CTA or on the loop. Sorry, but so it's not necessarily a problem to have multiple providers, but it becomes more important that it feels like a fully cohesive system. Now, there has been improvement. If folks aren't familiar, before they became free, there is a single pass that can work on SMART, on DDOT, on the Q line, and that you spend $2 and get 4 hours of unlimited rides on any of those systems. That's a little bit, that's a more of what you feel in other metro regions. There's some real barriers to actually merging the systems, especially in terms of federal labor laws and in terms of pension debt. But as long as we can have a strong, coordinated system, that shouldn't be a barrier to having a very effective system.
Now, Chuck Altman had the question, is there any discussion of when MOGO will start in the suburbs?
Yes, I did speak with some of the folks from MOGO. It's briefly delayed. We don't have an exact start time. They want to wait until after this crisis is passed. Now, for folks who are in area who do go to areas that have existing MOGO service, they are in fact offering a free month worth of rides, because actually biking can be a pretty good way to travel, in social isolation or social distancing. They are still planning to expand into Southeast Oakland, but their start date has been indefinitely postponed. So stay tuned. Hopefully later this spring or into the summer, they'll be able to launch that and have that connection as well.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Megan Owens of Transportation Riders United? Well, thank you, Megan, very much. That was very enlightening. It's a pleasure to think what we're going to do after the pandemic. We all know eventually this is going to end. It's going to be a lot worse because of the incompetence and deceit of our president. It's going to kill a lot more people than it otherwise should have. It's going to last much longer than it should last, but it is going to end, and we're going to emerge out of it. And when we do, we're going to have a decent transit system, thanks to people like Megan Owens and Marie Donegan, too, our other local transit advocate. But thanks a lot, Megan, for joining us.
Happy to.